Just gonna chill. It's Sunday. Why not? So this is from the prehistory guys. There's 12,000 subscribers to their site. This is from April 19th, 2020. I'm starting about 15 minutes in. This is 2 hours long. Full movie Standing with Stones, a journey through prehistoric Britain and Ireland. Why not? So if you want to watch this, you go to the Prehistory Guys channel on YouTube. Let's see, let's read about it. Over 2 years in the making, Standing with Stones was created by two men who happened to have a passion for the monuments of stone left to us by Neolithic Bronze Age ancestors. The result is a remarkable feature-length documentary film that takes the viewer on an epic journey of discovery, uncovering the true extent and variety of megalithic Britain and Ireland. So you can go over to their channel and check it out. I'm about 15 minutes in. Like I said, if you want to match up with me, I am, let's see, at the 17-minute mark. I'm going to turn this up.
Classic Bronze Age example. It's about 4,000 years old. And basically, it's a stone box. And it would have held the remains of an individual or even a family sometimes, with a cover stone, and then the whole thing would have been covered with a mound of earth called cairn.
Right, cool. Again, go over to the Prehistory Guys on YouTube.
This is Yellowmead.
I don't know these
just
guys, I
north of
just think this
Gussator.
looks
You can
interesting.
probably see up
so
there
might as
behind me,
well.
where we were earlier.
It's
This
Sunday,
place
like
is
I
incredibly
said.
unusual. It's a quadruple stone circle. It's strange.
Sometimes
There's no
I just
alignments
listen and then I'll
amongst
play
the
some
stones
music
to
or
suggest
something.
astronomy, and there's no central kist to suggest an elaborate burial. Just these enigmatic rings. There are theories. There's supposed to have been a cairn here, but nobody knows what came first, how it developed, or what it was actually used for. And I think it looks like a target. It's village hunting practice. Nearest spear to the middle wins. That's what it is.
10 miles to the east is another oddity that leaves you wondering. This is the Greyweathers double stone circle. They're probably early Bronze Age, about 4,000 years old, and when they were excavated in 1898, both circles were found to be strewn with ashes. No one knows whether it was from cremations or domestic burning, or how old the circles were before the burning took place. They're aligned north-south, the southern circle being slightly bigger, and it's been suggested that they were a place for the gathering of the clans. But I think that's silly. You wouldn't create a neutral territory and have one side bigger than the other. We can only guess what they were for.
I'm not tuned in to whatever they're doing. It's just the tuning I had, and hopefully it works out.
Crazy. You go from falling over stones round every bend to really having to hunt them out. It seems strange that moving east through England,
you find less and less sites. But actually it says a lot about our ancestors through the ages. When communities are successful, settlements continue to develop. People only move to new pastures when the land stops providing. And in the West Country, that's exactly what happened. Even today, there's very little building because the land just isn't hospitable. Fortunately for us, though, it means that our ancestors' hard work is still there to see. When you look at the development of societies in other countries, it's clear from places like the Great Pyramids or the Acropolis that the cities have continued to develop without enormous cultural movement. Most other cities in the world have grown through either knocking down or building over the ancient structures. In places where those ancient monuments are still there to be seen, they've lost their original meaning, but somehow they've kept a level of importance for the people. Of course, that could just be a question of wonder. You have to ask, would the Great Pyramids still be there if they'd only been 30 feet tall? Sometimes, like 9 stones in Dorset,
trippy.
our ancient monuments stand neglected by the roadside, virtually unnoticed by passing motorists and unvisited by all but the enthusiast.
Whoa. Sounds kind of similar. I didn't even mean to do that.
The passing centuries have left many ancient sites with a mysterious anonymity. We respect them, but we don't understand them, and their social importance has long since disappeared. We protect them and ignore them in equal measure. Knowlton Henge is a perfect example. This Bronze Age site is part of an enormous settlement that sprawls across the surrounding countryside. It's hard to see a lot of it now, but this raised mound originally rose an astonishing 17 feet out of the ditch around it. The careful placing of this Norman church would have been a very powerful way of putting an end to any earlier non-Christian goings-on. Now, its crumbling ruin sits like a weary trespasser on unguarded land.
This is the Chestnuts in Addington, Kent, and I wish I had one of these in my garden.
It's the remains of a Neolithic long barrow that was used well into the Bronze Age, and there are other sites like this in the southeast. Not far from here, the remains of another long barrow called Cauldron looks out across the open hills and moors which haven't changed much for thousands of years.
Standing stone.
But in and around towns that have been changing constantly for hundreds of years, the land has been progressively
Wrote it in a
divided
book,
into
so they
smaller
think
and
that's
smaller
the
plots.
truth, but I
So
don't think
structures were
so.
pulled down as their relevance in society faded, no longer showed
Welcome
that
to
way, so much as simply hidden away.
Thankfully not
I
here,
think
though.
that's about the sun god, don't you? Yeah. Worshiping the
It's
sun.
easy to see how history covers its tracks, especially in cities. Constantly
Shine like
developing
the
new
sun.
sites of buildings from decades ago, let alone hundreds or thousands of
From
years.
London to Ireland. From Dublin to
So many
Britain.
will wonder what on earth we're doing in the
Standing stone.
to
Blood and bone.
You'd be right.
I don't
Absolutely nothing.
know.
Yeah, all
so goes the wind, you know.
Is the London Stone. Truth is, we don't know its origin, but we do know that it's been here for a long time. It's actually part of a much bigger stone.
Some say that the kings used to be made king if the stone sang out and said, "You're the one." Standing stone,
Across the road in the last few hundred years.
blood and
Possible
bone,
clues remain in folklore. There are stories
married to the land, they call that sovereignty.
say that it was the
Way
top of a pillar in Brutus's palace. It's also reputedly
lost
so
in
was
the
made in London.
ages,
So you see a milestone that says London 27 miles. It's
crevices and cracks. Standing strong,
there are thousands
blood and bone.
historic sites around Britain.
Seems like all I ever say,
It's incredible that out of all those sites, most people only seem to know this one.
Here as the cars pass on
Now, obviously, I'm not being
by.
dismissive of Stonehenge itself.
Stonehenge,
Just the fact that when visitors come to marvel at the
coming,
imposing
everybody's
monoliths, they
coming
miss the
there
scale
to
and
take a look
significance of
around.
the entire complex. There are literally hundreds of
Circle
prehistoric sites
around.
spreading for miles in all directions.
Ooh,
Earthworks, long barrows, avenues of
but
stones built on
that's just
sites
the
of
tip
massive
of the
curses. They all
iceberg.
show that this was a huge, thriving community.
The ancient
Woodhenge,
stones
a couple of miles
carrying us
northeast,
in the
is the remains of a
circle
complex
around.
timber structure, probably an enclosed circular building which sat on its own raised mound, long since flattened by ploughing. West Kennet Long Barrow to the north, at 350 feet long, is the largest chambered tomb in Wales. A little further north again is Silbury Hill, the biggest man-made mound in Europe. It's estimated that to build this giant would have taken 500 men working every day for 10
A lot
years.
more than that, in my opinion.
The term henge originally came from Stonehenge. In Old English, it refers to the hanging stones or lintels, but it came to mean something quite different. And ironically, Stonehenge itself is not, strictly speaking, a henge. Henges have a ditch inside the raised bank, but at Stonehenge the ditch lies on the outside, which implies that they had quite different functions.
Circles.
The true henge of this vast
Right,
Wiltshire
you got your
complex
inner
is
circle
Avebury.
core,
Avebury is over 20 miles north of
and then it
Stonehenge,
expands
a
out
short day's
from that.
walk for our ancestors, and it is without doubt the grandest ceremonial site in Britain. Today its splendour is really only visible from the air, but when it was built it must have been a breathtaking sight.
Sure it was.
When Avebury was excavated in the early part of the 20th century, the surrounding ditch was found to have been sheer-sided and 30 feet deep. On the outside of the ditch was a wide, flat terrace running at the foot of the bank, which towered 20 feet above the central earthwork. Our ancestors excavated 150,000 tons of chalk rubble to create the ditch, an immense undertaking for something clearly of immense importance. And it wasn't the only one in the region. 50 miles to the west in Somerset stands the deceptive stone circle of Stanton-on-True.
It looks pretty boring, doesn't it? An enormous stone circle with a smaller outer one at each end. But its bland appearance on the landscape gives no clue as to its original scale and importance. This circle is over 100 meters across. Now, in diameter, that makes it second only to the vastness of Avebury. Some years ago, the Ancient Monuments Laboratory of English Heritage carried out a magnetometer survey across the whole site. And what they discovered is breathtaking. Inside the circle were 9 concentric rings of wooden posts, each post a meter apart, and each post a metre or more across. Now, you don't use a post a metre or more across unless you need it to be tall. And on top of that, the whole site was surrounded by a ditch and a raised bank. It may have been wood, but this would be every bit as impressive as the stone circles of Stonehenge and Avebury.
But perhaps there is a reason for the posts not to have been so tall. The design of a henge implies that the banks were for spectators. The inner terraced Avebury adds weight to this idea, suggesting a level walkway for finding your place before climbing the bank, exactly
Maybe
as
the
we still
whole
do with
tribe
arenas
could
today.
gather.
There would
Like,
be no sense in having
and the
posts
closer you
so
got to
tall
the
that they
center, the more
obscured the
authority
spectator's
that
view,
person would have,
and they need only
right?
be the height of a
Maybe
man
even
for
the
the audience
king
to see the
could
whole
stand in the
spectacle from their
center,
raised position on the massive
or
bank.
queen for
So
that
why
matter.
create an artificial forest where spectators could see, but participants could not? For me, the most likely answer is blood sports. And shocking as that may sound
I don't
today,
know
it's
about
important
that.
to remember that this was a time when most of Britain was covered in forest, and the most
Maybe
skilled hunter would probably have been held in high esteem, possibly
there
even
could be
beyond his
battle
own
for
community.
leadership. I
The
don't know.
deep ditch would stop animals escaping into the crowd, while the forest of posts would create an enclosed but nevertheless real hunting ground. And then again, this amount of huge posts could easily have
Never
supported a
seen this, so I
floor,
have no
exactly
idea
the
what
same
to
design
expect.
concept as at the Great Colosseum of Rome, but preceding it by thousands of years. We can only wonder.
With the extraordinary variety of sites in the region, many of them of such immense size, I think this whole area of Wiltshire through Somerset must have been the capital of prehistoric Britain. And there's another important aspect of these chalk lands. That's that where there's chalk, there's flint, the very basis of prehistoric currency. Imagine a land where the slag heaps you create, your building rubble, is full of money. With the raw materials for axe making under their feet, the people of Wiltshire would have had enormous wealth. There was a huge cultural shift in the Bronze Age. The increase in farming and settlement building meant that for the first time, people had to defend their territory, and so the warrior culture was born, and with it, the use of horses. Now, when the Uffington White Horse was excavated in the early 1980s, both it and the hill fort alongside were both dated to the late Bronze Age. Now, you only need to look at the Spanish conquistadors' decimation of South America to see what a few warriors on horseback can do. These really were rich and powerful people.
As communities grew, inevitably rituals became progressively more elaborate, and burial grounds like Pretty Nine Barrows illustrate the huge significance they held for the community. Even today, the very word barrow still holds a ghostly place in folklore. Like any graveyard, there's a sense of walking amongst
Walking through
dead.
the hills,
Over time, the whole
I can
relationship between the
see
living and the
as
dead
the
became more structured,
clouds
giving rise to
overhead,
sophisticated temples in a variety of building styles.
mounds and
This
mounds
brick
and
was
mounds
characterized by
and
the symmetry of the stone
mounds,
and some of them are wonderfully preserved. So,
deep into
like
the
Stonehenge,
burrow.
they're burial chambers which are accessed from within
We don't know what's in there.
Excavations seem to
Stand
suggest
in
that chambers in this
stones,
style of tomb specific
blood
to
and
age and
bones.
gender of the dead. Children buried in the first chamber on the left were sorted clockwise, with adult males in the end chamber, with
It's
the
a
old
rough
being buried in the chamber
road,
closest to the entrance on the right.
ancient as the stone grows.
Wayland's smithy is a much
Crystals in the
grander
crystal
structure,
cave,
with huge
that's what it
stones
shows.
forming the imposing forecourt. It was developed over a long period of time. The mound we still see today was actually built over an earlier mortuary house made of timber. Others, like Bellasnap in the Cotswolds, have external burials along the side walls, but with the same meticulous attention to design and location.
Sure as the
They
green
certainly
grass
pick beautiful
grows,
places to lay their loved ones to rest.
sure as the sun shines in there. Very majestic music he chose, or rather, whoever chose, I don't know. I have no idea what this is.
You know, things rousing Jerusalem might never have been written
No.
if it weren't for these rolling stones in Oxfordshire. It may come as a surprise to know that
Always the
Blake's
Christian
art
override,
writing
but
was
you know
inspired
that's
by
Europe
the
for
ideas of
you.
an 18th century clergyman and friend of Isaac Newton.
William
When
Stukeley
the real
was secretary
origin
to the
is
Society of
pagan,
Antiquaries
my
when he
opinion,
visited
of
this
course.
place, and apparently he had a
If that's even
life-changing
a proper
experience.
term to use.
His visit brought him to believe that the sites were religious and ritual centers built in ancient times by the Druids. Stukeley
Okay.
meticulously catalogued, described, and illustrated so many of our ancient monuments, bringing them firmly to public attention. And it's fair to say that their mystical importance and place in our hearts is entirely due to him. His passion led him to adopt the grandiose title of Archdruid Kindernax, ultimately inspiring the eccentric artist and poet William Blake to write his famous hymn. Jerusalem is actually about rekindling Druid culture in Britain.
Wow. That's interesting. Why would they put Jerusalem
This
over the
place
top of that?
is
I
a
don't
wonderful
know.
concoction of historical confusion. There's
Wow.
names and dates all over the place.
Maybe it was his
There's
way
tales
of
of
kind of
witchcraft and kingly
making
fighting,
it okay.
and
I
no
don't
sense
know.
to be made of any of it. It is a complicated site. On the other side of the road from the circle, there's a big outlier called the Kingstone. And on the other side of the field over there is a very forlorn dolmen called the Whispering Lights. The name Rollrights originates from Viking times when it was called Hrolla Landi, which meant the land with special rights belonging to Hrolla. And apart from being a landowner, we don't really know anything about it. Then it was thought to refer to a Norman called Roland, who fought a battle here. Except that the battle near here happened in 916 AD, and
Again,
Roland died in
give
778.
full respect to these guys who did this, the prehistory guys.
Then, perhaps the most tenacious myth
They've
of
got
all, there's the
12,000
story of
subscribers.
Danish King Rollo. You see, the land on which the stones stand was actually owned by a witch. And one day, while passing through, Rollo and his trusty knights found themselves confronted by the crone. She said to King Rollo,
Oh,
7
lots
long
of stories
strides shalt thou
associated with
take.
the crone.
If long Compton thou canst see, King of England thou shalt be. Stick, stock, stone, said Rollo, as King of England I shall be known. And he took his 7 strides, but the view was hidden by the slight rise of the ground. The witch screeched with laughter. As long Compton thou canst not see, King of England thou shalt not be. Rise up, stick, and stand still, stone.
Now
King of
also
England thou
remember
shalt be none.
that
Thou and
originally
thy
you
men
had to be
all
approved by
stones
the
shall be,
sovereignty
and I
goddess,
myself an elden tree.
and you were married to
Which all
her,
sounds
I
very
mean
mean and
loyalty.
self-destructive to me. Ironically, if Rollo's legs
And
had
there
been
could
a
be
bit
multiple
longer,
meanings
then
on
his
that one.
strides may well have shown him the village of Long Compton in the valley below. Instead, he and his men
Down
took
in
the
the
stone
valley
as we see it
below,
today. Although people do
in
say
the
that
clearing
some
they
lights now
know that the
no doubt
crone might
can
stay
see
there. Sure as a crow
So what do we
flies.
know? Aside from the tales of witchcraft which persist to this day, it
Shores
is
of
generally accepted that the stones were
glass.
erected about 5,000 years ago, and excavations here have uncovered Bronze Age burials, cremations, a couple of flint tools, and an urn.
But perhaps most significant of all is its location. Sitting on the Cotswold Ridgeway, the Rollrights were probably, for thousands of years, a really important place on what could be the oldest trade route in the country. Trading in flint tools, pottery, livestock, and textiles was probably very well established, and this was probably a major link between southern England and the whole of the rest of Britain.
Our
Shores
stones
of
belong to an age long
glass.
before British territories were established, and there's
Alright,
something
we
very
got
evocative
Wales
about
on the
crossing the
left
national
and
border that didn't
England on the
exist in
right.
those ancient times.
Or Britain, whatever you want to say.
Wales appears to have far fewer megalithic remains than some other parts of Britain, but that may be simply because they're harder to reach, and many of them in inaccessible places are forgotten and unnamed. But those that have had an enduring place in people's imagination owe much to the richness of Welsh folklore. The Pontypridd rocking stone has been a meeting place for as long as we know, and it has strong connections with the Welsh bardic tradition. Interestingly, though, the stone circle around it was constructed by bards in 1849, and that made me wonder. Very occasionally, we still build stone circles in a kind of homage to our distant ancestors, but with no real knowledge of their original purpose. How do we know that half of the British circles are Bronze Age follies built in homage to their Neolithic ancestors with no knowledge of their intent? Tinkinswood is another example of a 7 Cotswold tomb, and this enormous Neolithic monument is home to the largest capstone in Britain, 30 feet long and weighing around 50 tons. Folklore says that if you fall asleep here, you will wake as a bard or go mad. Although with some of the bards I've met, I'm not
Now
sure it
remember,
isn't the same
bards
thing.
were lower level considering we had fillies.
Out in the wilder countryside, the open moorlands echo the barren landscapes of Dartmoor, and everything seems to disappear into the vast openness of it all. Above the River Tor,
Maybe
if
there's
it
a
weren't for the
guiding
massive
hand.
standing stone called Main Moor, you could easily miss the circle of Cerrig. But however unimpressive the circle may be, its position looking down through the valleys is spectacular.
This is Gorsebower in Pembrokeshire, and it's typical of Welsh stone circles. They're all made of small stones, which is really strange because you see that ridge up there behind me? Well, that's the Preselles. Right? Now I can tell you from the wonders of GPS technology that Stonehenge is 135 miles from here. You know the blue stones of Stonehenge? They came from there. What were they thinking?
It may be another good example of the possible remnants of old oral traditions that Merlin appears in Welsh folklore and is the repeated builder of Stonehenge long before his emergence as a wizard in romantic
Could it be said
Arthurian legend.
possibly that
These
near
faint
there
strands could connect
was
to
a
an
king?
age far older than we
Oh,
imagine.
now we're getting into some interesting stuff here.
Dolmens punctuate the
Or
landscape
Braun
in this
the
part of
Blessed,
Wales,
right?
although here they're usually called cromlechs
Or
and are all that remain of much
Philosopher
bigger
Kings.
structures. Not far from the
Maybe even
Preselles,
Philosopher
the tiny
Queens.
Llechyr Tripeth stands lonely on a hilltop, and
That's
its
why you
small
always
size
hear
makes it difficult to imagine what it may have looked like.
three
But a few miles to the south,
priestesses,
Ventura
right?
Fan is so huge that it takes a tall man to reach its
Why
enormous
the number
capstone.
3?
And these
Because
stones were covered by a
3
long mound of
can
earth and
create a
stones which stretched
stable.
about 100 feet down the hill behind it.
Anyway, 3 can create a stable standing stone. So you would have, makes sense, just basics, right? You would have 3 main posts or 3 main stones, and then you can set a flat stone over the
Further
top
north,
of it, and
in a
now you have a
village called
shelter
Uzbetikundu,
that stands
far
for a
from
long
Aberystwyth,
time
is an
and
incongruous
would be
site
tough
illustrating
and
the
be able
struggle
to handle
between
the
ancient
weather.
belief and Christianity.
Just my
The once
thinking,
powerful
just my
stone
thinking.
circle has been absorbed into the walls of the church graveyard, very much like the church sitting on top of Knowlton Henge in Dorset. The early church clearly recognized the greater impact of using the
And
site
they
for
would have
something
set
new
those
rather
on
than destroying
solid
it.
areas too.
In contrast, the unspoilt circle of Molehill sits majestically on a hill looking out across the landscape just as it has for millennia. And sites like this highlight an aspect of these monuments which is often overlooked. They look similar, but this is a circle of stones forming an almost unbroken enclosure, clearly different from a stone circle where the stones are widely spaced and each has a deliberate placing.
Yep. Did you go over there yet? The prehistory guys.
High in the hills overlooking
I'm doing
Coventry
this
Bay
for
sits
free.
a site called the Druid
I like
Circle.
the way this guy, the way these guys designed their video. This,
All through Wales links with the Druids
it's more of
seem
a
to grow
fair
stronger,
cover.
and here it's not without
You can
reason.
tell they have a passion for what they're doing.
Although little is known about them, we do know that in Celtic tradition, the Druids were already long established by 200 BC. To the rest of society, these revered teachers clearly held a special status, and from the later accounts of Julius Caesar, referring to the Druids in Gaul, we find that they
but
were
remember
exempt from all normal taxes and
that
obligations.
it may not be completely accurate.
Interestingly, when it
I
came to
mean, as
electing
far
a
as Julius
successor
Caesar
for the
goes,
position of supreme druid, if it couldn't be resolved by vote, it was decided by armed force. So
some
much
may
for
be
future
accurate,
research
some may
papers.
not be. I don't
The
know.
Roman invasion of Britain was ruthless, and as they forged their way north, the opposing Brits, along with the Druids, were forced to retreat ahead of them through Wales. And it was AD 60 that everything came to a head. Rome had to overcome the troublesome Druids if it was going to achieve total control of Britain. It was here on the Isle of Anglesey that the Druids made their last
He's
stand
getting into
against
some
the
deep
might of the
stuff
Roman
now.
Empire. And contemporary
I
accounts
didn't
tell of a
expect
people
him to go
far
so
removed
hardcore, but
from
he's
the
going
peaceful white road
hardcore.
mystics imagined by Stukely.
He probably has an interest in druidry if he is not a druid
The final
himself,
battle
which I wouldn't be
started here
surprised if
at the
both of
Menai
these
Strait.
guys were
The
at least,
Roman army arrived at the riverbank over
new
there and
school
moved
or
across
whatever.
to a terrifying
But it
sight.
seems to me as
Tacitus
he's going
described
back
the
to the
enemy
old
as a
school,
dense array
or
of
he's
armed
attempting
warriors.
to.
He said, women in black with disheveled hair were dashing between the ranks like furies and waving brands. Druids with their arms
He's
in the air
going
yelling
hard.
curses at the Roman army. He says that the soldiers were paralyzed with fear. But nonetheless, the Romans won. And the Druids' mythical status today is the legacy of that once powerful force. And who knows what body of knowledge died with them.
One needs to remember that despite our perception of the Druidic links with stone circles and ancient monuments,
At least he
these
does
sites were
that.
built
Wow, I'm
long,
impressed.
long before we hear anything about the existence of Druids. For example, on Anglesey is the profoundly mystical
You
Barclay
can tell I'm not Christian
years old.
at all.
A circular
I
structure
got raised
which
in
leaves no doubt
Mormonism,
that it was a
and then
significant
I
setting for
decided,
ritual
you know,
practices.
that's not for me. But I don't
There are
hate
what
people
appear to be
because they
burial
want to be
chambers to the
Mormon
sides,
either.
although
So
only one was found to contain human
You know.
remains.
people make their choices and
Stones positioned within the tomb
choose to
bear strange
focus on what
carvings,
they
and
do.
strangest of all, archaeologists have
Oh,
found that in the
remember
central
that
area,
spiraled
a fire
stone?
had burned for
Trying
a
to remember the
long
exact
time,
name. You just showed
into
a
the
close
middle
up
of
of
which
that.
had been poured a stew.
Huh? The
A stew
cauldron.
containing eel,
Man, this guy.
rice,
Oh
whiting,
my God.
rabbit, mouse, shrew, snake, frog, and toad.
He is going for it.
Easy as it is for us to associate such a recipe with a Shakespearean witch's brew, actually there is another interesting possibility. These people seem to be fascinated by creatures that live in the margins of the natural world.
Or that
Creatures that live
in
underground, where
burrows.
man would only place the dead, or in water where man couldn't exist at all, or only coming out at night when the veils between the living and the dead seem to be lifted.
Wow.
In the mind of Neolithic man, could these creatures have seemed to pass between the worlds of the living and the dead? However we interpret
That's
this remarkable
interesting.
find, discovering these
Gateways.
organic remains has given us a unique glimpse into the ritual
the other
lives of our
world.
ancestors. Soup?
Blood and bone. Standing stone. Burrows into the ground. Gateways to the other world.
This is Bryn Celli Ddu, and it really is one of the most significant sites in Britain. Its history is
Blood and
long
bone
and
to
very
the
complex, and there's
crone's
been a lot of
nest,
debate over its
said.
construction. About 5,000 years ago, it was a henge, complete with ditch and bank, and to emphasize its importance, the central area was crowned by a circle of big stones. Then, about 1,000 years
Little bit of
later,
mucus in the
it was
back of your
turned
throat
into a
helps with that.
huge chambered cairn, far bigger than is visible today. The ditch was
Worked
filled,
perfectly.
and earth from the bank was used to provide material for the earth mound. And to make the tomb, the circle stones were moved and reused, or broken and buried in a total destruction of what had been before.
I did see a crow actually
Another
yesterday
example
when I
of a
was up in the
total
mountains.
change of usage. A place being taken over
And I don't go up there
completely
very
and
often,
changed
but I
from an
did see
open
one.
place for the living into an enclosed place for the dead.
I think it's called
In a way, it's
Big
like the stone
Cottonwood
circle of
Canyon.
Ysbyty Cynfyn being absorbed
It's up
into the
there.
walls of a later Christian graveyard, and it's possibly our best example
I
of
don't
the
live up
underlying
there, but I went
complexity
up
at
there.
any site that was used for thousands of years.
Gotta be honest with you, I came here yesterday. And I thought that when I got to Anglesey, I'd tell you about the Druids and show you a couple of sites and go. But I found something here that I really can't understand how it's been missed before. And it's genuinely the most exciting thing I've ever discovered. And yesterday it left me stunned for hours. Come and have a look at this. This is the burial chamber, and here stands an impressive pillar of stone. It doesn't touch the ceiling, so it's not structural. It's important in its own right. Now, archaeological text and writing
the stone
about
would be
this
used to
site have
claim the
described
space.
this as a monolith and as a carefully dressed pillar of stone, meaning it was cut to be this shape. But you can't cut these textures. So what could be cylindrical and this rough texture? It's a fossil tree trunk. Look, you can see where the bark has split, revealing the wood grain underneath. All around you can see traces of that. Now, don't switch off when I say what I'm going to say next.
That's for Christians.
Some of these cut marks can only have been made when it was wood, not when it was stone.
Oh, wow.
Here, the bark has dragged.
Now that's
Stone would have
interesting.
split or shattered.
He's saying,
and down here,
wow,
2 distinct marks, blows, where
this
the wood
is
has
trippy.
pulped. And you
This
can't
guy's
make these
tripping me
marks
out.
in stone unless it's mudstone. But in that
Pardon me.
case, you won't get these
That
textures.
doesn't happen to me very
Now, you'll
often.
either think I'm crazy or you'll be as stunned as I was yesterday. Because, as far as I was concerned, the latest fossil wood comes from the Miocene period, which is about 20 million years ago. I sat on the floor, stunned and confused, and then rang a friend of mine who knows about these things. And apparently, the latest research from Japan has proved that petrification, so it's turning into stone, can occur much faster than we thought. And it is conceivable that a piece of wood this size could petrify in under a century. But that's in extreme conditions. Now, even if we give it a few thousand years, we still have a wonderful story. We could have a tree trunk that has been worked by man. It falls into a bog with a high acid content and a high silica content. And over that period of time, it turns to stone.
Wow.
Now, when it was found again, it must have seemed like a thing of absolute magic. To Neolithic man, wood symbolized life and stone symbolized death. So here was a being of life and afterlife, living and
Imagine
dead.
this.
Whether it was found by the builders of Brinkelly
Now,
or
this is the
whether it was
trippiest
brought
thought
here from
I've
elsewhere,
ever had.
already a highly prized item.
And I don't
may
know if
never
this
know.
is even accurate or
I'm just
not.
amazed that nobody has written about this
But
before.
imagine
And I hope that
the
specialists
earth
get
was
here to
grown
date it and
into
soon.
existence.
Because if it is 20 million years old, I don't know what I'll do.
You see where I'm going with this? And then petrified. Wow. Imagine. So, wood becoming stone and wood carrying all elements. My heartbeat is going bing, 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 bing. I'm like, wow. I don't know. I like to just ponder and go, okay, well. And then the stone would be the older wood. And then the wood itself would be the new growth. I don't know. You're like, no way.
This really is the land of fairy tales.
I like to just let my mind
turning
go.
the road might reveal a sight so beautiful that your heart skips a beat.
Just imagine
It's hard to
reality
know where to
being
start.
different than we ever thought. Now imagine that the earth has a core consciousness and it literally willed itself
Until you see
into
Castle Ruddery.
existence.
Even as stone
Gathering,
circles go, this looks a bit of a mess. But
elements
underneath its
throughout
tired appearance
creation.
lies a site
I
as
don't know.
complex as Stanton Drew or Brinkelly.
Yeah, I think anyone that says
Known
they
as a
know
circle
100%,
the stones are surrounded by
they
a
don't
raised
know.
bank, and excavations showed it to have been built using soil from a ditch lying 24
It's too
feet
old.
outside the circle. And if that wasn't impressive enough, the excavations also revealed that the whole thing was surrounded by another bank, which was supported by a wall of wooden posts. But even with all of that, it isn't what excited me about this site. Until I came here, I didn't know when or where I was going to talk about a particular obsession of mine. Drill holes. Same size of tool.
About the size
They've
of
been
a
dismissed
thumb.
by some as being Devon and Cornwall, with many of them still in positions which bear no relation to possible clearing. That I have good reason to be excited by this apparently minor detail back on Dartmoor in southwest England at a place called Fernworthy. It would be extraordinary if these stones were not cut and so we may have another piece of evidence for a shared ritual of nothing about.
I might give these,
In
like,
Europe,
seriously,
estimated to weigh between 100 and 150
these guys are hardcore, man. Why do you think I'm sitting here watching? It's Sunday. What else do I have to
Others,
do?
like Labakali near Fermoy, are extraordinary in their design. This looks more like a prehistoric diner to me. It's really hard not to imagine it filled with equally tall and slender robed figures, and so carefully seem to exist in another world.
More than likely, he's probably a Freemason, but I don't know. Like, I'm not going to. Every group of people has a mixed bag, you know what I'm saying? So it's ancient, that's for sure.
Have a look at this. Here's a map of a tiny area in the south. Okay. Standing stone, cross-inscribed stone, boulder burial, standing stone,
How
stone,
cool would
soil,
that be?
megalithic
Like,
tomb,
I think
megalithic
I'll
tomb,
just
standing.
different
A map
areas.
of a tiny area in the north.
Busting out his maps.
Cairns, megalithic tomb. Over the whole of Ireland,
Yeah.
there are, if we do count the cairns and the barrows and all that stuff as well, there are more, for example. There's been comparatively little building, so the traces of our ancestors are still clear to see. Now, even allowing for the variations in population density, if there are 5,000 sites
In the southwest seems to lead to something worth visiting.
It's
Place
really
behind
cool.
it. It's amazing how the
Great,
proudly under open
grandfather.
skies, which seem to link it far more to the heavens than the earth, recorded archaeological sites in County Sligo. Well,
Did you go over there? Let's see where we're at. Right? We
this is
are at an hour and
Ireland's
6
largest
minutes.
megalithic cemetery.
And I
It's
make
amongst
no
the
money
oldest
off
and largest
this. I'm
megalithic
just doing
cemeteries
this
in
because
Europe,
of pure
and the dates
passion
here
of
are
doing it.
staggering.
That's it.
Earliest remains have been dated back to around 9,600 years ago, and the earliest megalithic tombs here to about 7,000 years ago.
Yes, I'm smoking.
So to put that in perspective, that's a very, very long time before any of the Great Pyramid building in Egypt. You see that lump up there behind me?
Cool. This is cool.
Knocknarea is
I
not
really like
alone amongst
this.
the
This is
surrounding
awesome.
mountains in having a summit.
Full movie.
But there's Queen Maeve, who could be buried here.
The prehistory guys. Give these guys.
Even though the cairn
in
itself
this
predates Maeve by a couple of
took
thousand
2
years,
years
tombs were
to
common
make.
in
No
Mave's
wonder. Prehistoryguys.uk. Patreon, the prehistory. I guess that would support their work.
Irish mythology
I don't have any
tells
money
of
for
people
that,
who
but
came
if
from over the
somebody
sea,
wanted to, they could
and
go over
noble
there and
figures, the
donate
kings
to
of
these
Tara,
guys.
the kings of Tuatha de Danann, and here,
Wow.
Queen Maeve. You know, whoever died. They agree that man isn't trying to solve the problem of his environment, and quite often that man made a mistake. Man lives in total harmony with his environment. He just happens to have created a completely artificial one over which he has far greater control. The accurate thing to say would be that urbanized man no longer lives in harmony with nature. Now, in Britain, the combination of Roman invasion and centuries of religious dogma destroyed or absorbed, sometimes confused that earlier heritage, as is so clear to see at places like Knowlton Henge, for example, or Ysbyty Cynfyn. Adopt it into the present, and it ceases to have the past that you so wish to hide. It only takes a few centuries of being told how and what to think and believe for almost all traces of a word-of-mouth tradition to disappear. So cultural heritage had to start all over again. The problem now is that our artificial environment maintains that separation from our ancestors, and the speed of change through our technological advances means that few figures in history hold their meaning. Who were the mythical kings of Tara, the kings of Tuatha de Danann, and Queen Maeve? We cling
See, he's
to the
saying,
heroic tales of King Arthur,
uh-huh.
of Robin Hood, because they remind us of the values that we hold dear. Love, honor, bravery, nobility. But historical figures don't fit so easily into an ever-evolving culture. There's really only one way to find modern-day
Raise a
heroes who
glass
would
to
fit
that
into a
one.
culture undergoing
Maybe you are
constant
somewhere
change.
out there.
We create celebrities.
Get yourself a cup and raise a glass to that. That's what I would say. That's what I do say. Amazing. Mad props.
It's interesting that as you move north through Ireland, the
Proppers,
sites seem to
as they
become
would say.
grander and more sophisticated. Still in County Sligo, the Court Cairn of Creevykeel is one of the finest examples of
I
this
hail
type of
from
structure.
Limerick. Well,
The open
not
area
originally,
has a
but my
puzzling
grandfather
circular
does.
construction with its own
I
passage
just call him
entrance, perhaps a
grandfather
kind of
rather than
pulpit,
great,
where the priest could make a grand
one of my
entrance when the congregation was settled in the wider area of the court. Beyond this lies what would have been the covered tomb itself, still guarded by imposing portal stones.
Among other backgrounds that I had.
Bigmore, near Londonderry, seems more like a showpiece of Bronze Age architectural design. The circles here are laid out in pairs, each pair having its own cairn and approaching stone rows. The overall sense of establishment, refinement of old rituals is almost tangible, especially at the most famous group of Ireland's prehistoric monuments, Knowth, Dowth and Newgrange in the Moyne Valley. Sadly, Dowth is little more than a ruin, long since ravaged by quarrying. But Knowth and Newgrange hold a level of artistry which leaves you speechless.
Ancient stone, which came first.
These Neolithic masterpieces show a level of sophistication which is impossible to take in on a single visit. Both Newgrange and Knowth are colossal monuments in themselves, each surrounded by numerous chambered tombs.
This is so cool. I have to put my guitar down. Wow.
Each also has its own crowning feature. Newgrange is meticulously built and aligned so that its gently rising passageway coincides with the angle of the sun's rays when they shine through the
That's
opening above the
right.
entrance. At the winter solstice, the sunlight reaches up the passageway to illuminate the central chamber. Knowth is notable for an entirely different reason. The whole site is adorned with decorated stones. In fact, Knowth alone accounts for over a quarter of all the known megalithic art in Europe.
If you're a big nerd like me, it is. I celebrate my nerdiness. This is more interesting to me
I
than a
couldn't leave
video
Ireland
game.
without saying something else about Newgrange.
From up here, it does look spectacular, but actually it's both a marvel and a monstrosity. Inside it's original. It's an awesome display of Neolithic sophistication. Creating that internal space that's only illuminated by the sun at winter solstice has to have been done with a fantastic understanding of astronomy.
There we go.
It really is worth a visit. But outside, it's a lie. Neolithic man would never have built that monster. That gleaming white quartz facade conceals a concrete wall, the only way that that design would stay standing. And all around, above the curbstones, there are concrete plinths that support the weight of the mound. Even the entrance, it's designed to take huge numbers of visitors. The
Interesting.
court would never have looked like that. It's a 1970s piece of nonsense. Come and marvel at the inside, but ignore the outside. It's just not true.
He busts it. Wow. So the actual larger stones that were just a solid piece would be more likely to be original. Well, that's his opinion, of course. You know what else is cool? This is played all the way
Halfway
through.
between Ireland and England, lying peacefully in the middle of the Irish Sea,
Isle of
is
Man.
perhaps the best kept secret of the British Isles. Aside from being a beautiful island, the Isle of Man is steeped in history and folklore. To this day, it remains politically independent and is home to the oldest unbroken parliament in the world.
They were
The
not
Tynwald was a
messing
meeting
around.
place for the clans and has had many reputed sites around the island throughout history. Even today, it maintains its ancient political
messing
rituals at
around at
Tynwald
all.
Hill, looking every bit a prehistoric mound in the town of St. John's.
Ooh, cool. Celtic knotwork.
This deeply held respect for heritage means that ancient sites often add to the sense of place, accepted and protected in intimate proximity to modern houses. It's also home to some unique prehistoric sites which clearly show a shared culture with the British Isles, but are individual in their design and layout. On open moorlands, overlooking the sea, across the hillsides and in secluded woods, the signs of ancient sites remain.
Flame tree and well. Tree flame and well.
If you saw a hut circle marked on a map, you probably wouldn't bother to even come and have a look. But without coming to explore, where on earth would you find a site like this? It's marked as just a hut circle, which implies that it's just the footings of a building where somebody lived. But if it's true that this is how our ancestors built their houses, then why aren't there thousands of them all over the landscapes? You have to wonder, is it possible that
getting
it
to the
was
core essence.
where maybe a holy man lived on the outskirts of a village, or maybe just somebody really antisocial who didn't want to have anything to do with anybody else?
Sorry.
Over on the southwest tip of the island is an extraordinary site called Molehill. It's hard to imagine how this would have looked in its day, but the circle of cairns laid out in pairs with numerous entrances hints at elaborate rituals under an open sky and with clear views to the setting sun. Many of the island's monuments are positioned looking out to sea, and sometimes the most unimposing sight can turn out to be quite special.
Of all the sites in the world that I've visited, this is one of my personal favorites. It's listed as just a cairn, but it's an excellent example of why we shouldn't take things for granted. And you can see on closer inspection why it can't just be a burial site. Have a look at this. This place is unique. It's a white quartz box. These walls and ceiling are huge blocks of white quartz. And The thing is that they're not at the center of the cairn, which is where a traditional burial would be. They're at the back. This place is intimate. It's really intimate. It is more than just a burial chamber.
Another feature of this mound can also be seen across Britain.
Look, I'm just
And
living.
that's the
I'm
small
not trying
ditch
to
and
be
raised
Mr.
bank
Fancy.
running around its
You haven't
perimeter.
noticed. Sure we have.
To me, it
That's
seems
my
likely
joke.
that they shared the same
Well, if you like.
function as the banks at the Great Henges. The perfect height for seating, to watch a priest minister to his flock
Just your
or whatever
average
ritual was
person
taking place on the
with
mound.
an over-average interest in prehistoric life.
This is Cashstone in Art, one of the most important sites on the whole of the Isle of Man.
Interesting.
About 4,000 years old.
He climbed through this little
And it's a
gateway
great
area
example of
before he
how
came
our
onto the
perceptions can
screen. He
become
had the
distorted
camera
and the
set up
impressions that
center
we get
line on it.
can be a bit misleading.
Wow.
We can be forgiven for thinking that you find somewhere like this in the landscape in an isolated place, and it would have been maybe a small community living somewhere. But when you think about it, the manpower necessary to create a site of this size must have been immense. When we're just left with the bare bones of a building, it can sometimes be very hard to imagine what it must have looked like when it was fully intact.
Climb through another one. These are like little gateways he's climbing through. Okay, I see what he's doing. And then it phased in like
Big, isn't it?
a mound. As he, like after he climbed through. That is cool.
This is something you don't see every day.
I'll make sure I include
We're used to
this
sites being
with the
isolated
video
because the
once it
needs of
uploads,
communities
but since it's
change
longer, it will
and they
take
move to
time.
new ground. But you find a place like this, and you can see that people have been living on this very spot for 5,000 years or more.
Laxey isn't a big town. Even today, its population is still only around 2,000 inhabitants. But nevertheless, its status as a successful settlement is clear.
And this site is huge. It's probably one of the biggest of its kind in the whole of the British Isles. The other half of it is way behind the house on the other side of the road over there. This whole site is called King Ori's Grave in Laxey. And if it was one site when it was built, with this central row of burial chambers running right through to the other side, it's even bigger than at Cashstone in Art that we were looking at before. So it must have been, for a big community, it must have been a very important site.
Perhaps the important point to note from the Isle of Man is that even on a small island, we can see evidence of communities which were big enough and stable enough, either to have daily sustenance sufficiently under control that they had the time to build such sites, or that the community was big enough for some people to be dedicated to the task of building.
Coming down the timeline of history, inevitably there are crossovers between archaeology and geology, but it is important not to blur the edges. Archaeology tells us about how our ancestors lived, what they did, what they left behind, but geology tells us about the land on which they lived. In archaeological terms, what we broadly call the Stone Age began way back 2.5 million years ago in the Paleolithic. And astonishingly, with this simple tool use, it was well over a million years before man realized